Hello. Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm Professor Astrid Schlürscheid, and I'm Pro-Vice Chancellor and Dean of the Faculty of Health and Life Sciences here at Oxford Brookes University. And it's wonderful to see so many of you here tonight. And a warm welcome to the Sam Zuckerberg Scholarship Annual Open Lecture. And we're delighted to welcome Baroness Ruth Deech, DBE, who will be delivering tonight's lecture entitled Freedom of Speech on Campus and the Question of Israel. So now I'd really like to introduce you to Professor Raymond Dweck, CBE. Raymond is Emeritus Professor of Glycobiology at the University of Oxford. He was advisor to the President of Ben-Gurion University of the Negev from 1998 to 2020. And he was also awarded a CBE on the recommendation of the Foreign Office in 2013 for furthering UK-Israel scientific collaborations. Raymond is also a friend of the Sam Zuckerberg Scholarship and will now tell you a little more about the scholarship. Raymond.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. And I'm really here to put Ben-Gurion University into context and tell you a little bit about it and the scholarship. Well, Israel is a very small country. It's 20,000 square kilometers, which is about the size of Wales. And the landmass, just to put in proportion, is 1/6 of 1% of the landmass of the Middle East. Its population is 9 million, of which 75% are Jewish and 21% are Arab. And then you've got other minorities there as well. Most of the 9 million people, like 92% of them, live in the north of Israel, which is shown here in green. And the Negev, which is 60% of the landmass of Israel, only has 8% of the population. Now, the Ottoman rulers, followed by the British mandatory authorities, regarded the Negev as uninhabitable, and it was considered its main importance was political and strategic, and it was rather a buffer zone. David Ben-Gurion was Israel's first prime minister, and he was first prime minister from 1948, the founding of the state, to 53, and then again from 55 to 63. He saw things rather differently about the Negev. So he set a personal example by when he came after the end of his first tenure as prime minister. He went to live in the Negev, with the idea that people would follow him down there and he would develop the region. In addition, he wanted to found an institute of higher education. So this was the institute that he founded after the end of his second tenure as prime minister. He comes to Beersheba and he founds an institute. And as I say here, you can see the students were very interested, or the local population was very interested. And then if you look now at Ben-Gurion University today, it has 3 campuses. The main campus is in Beersheba. There's another one in Sde Boker that does desert studies. I'll say a little bit about that in a moment. And the one in Eilat mainly concentrates on hospitality. Ben-Gurion University is the only residential university in Israel. And currently, there are about 20,000 students, of which, importantly, 53% are women. There's a rich cultural diversity in the university, which you can see just by walking around. In 1979, the historic event took place, which I think is quite defining for BGU and its culture. It was where Anwar Sadat and the Israeli Prime Minister, Begin, signed a peace agreement. Ben-Gurion University in the last 20 years, or 30 years really, has been driving the development of the Negev. So transport links, trains, roads were being built to take traffic and population to the Negev. And the idea of the university starting in the middle of the desert was to create centers of excellence, like the National Institute for Biotechnology, or there are other ones involved in autism and so on, to create centers of excellence that would bring people there. But the real thing that attracted a lot of people was to build advanced technology parks, which are really thriving down there. And so you have the Silicon Wadi of the Negev. On the Sde Boker campus, challenges and solutions for real world problems. So the desert institutes there have a mission to combat desertification and the global challenges which are related at the moment to food security, water security, and clean energy. And they have another school down there, part of the campus, which combines agriculture and biotechnology of drylands, environmental energy research, and of course, water, which is crucial in the Middle East. This is a melting pot for students from around the world to come and learn about desertification. But BGU has also been a catalyst for Bedouin women's education in the Negev. We have dedicated financial grants to attract Bedouin women, particularly, to come to the university. And at the moment, there are 568 Bedouin students, of which 436 are female. And this year, in March, this remarkable book, Hope is a Woman's Name, was written by Amal El-Sana Al-Juj, in which she defines herself as a Palestinian Arab, a citizen of the State of Israel, and a Bedouin in culture. And I recommend the book because you really see the power of education. It's a testimony to the transformational role that Ben-Gurion University had in empowering Bedouin women through education and also for teaching them the power of dialogue in their own society and in the wider society. Now, one of the early Oxford Brookes Sam Zuckerberg scholarship was Yasmin Hajameh. So she gets educated at Ben-Gurion University, and she comes to Brookes. And she feels really empowered after being at Brookes. So she goes back and she starts teaching English in the Kasifa, a Bedouin town. And I went to visit her there with Sandra, and she was under great pressure not to teach women, but she insisted that women had rights, and she's really leading a movement that women have a right to education and also a right to study at the university. So that's really a success story for the Oxford Brookes Sam Zuckerberg Scholar. And the Brookes Scholarship exemplifies the power of dialogue on university campuses as well as in society. So the Sam Zuckerberg Scholarship was created in 2012. It was the brainchild of the Oxford Jewish Chaplaincy Board, in particular Isaac Garson and Sandra Dweck. And Roy Zuckerberg met the president of this university at the time and decided that he would actually help in this. So here are some of them. And the current Zuckerberg Scholarship is Tom Elner, and she's now going to tell you a little bit about herself. Thank you.
Nice to meet you all. My name is Tom Elner, and I'm the new Oxford Brookes Scholar. I will take us to the very beginning. This is my family. I'm a full-time Sentry sister to twins younger than me and an older brother. My family means the world to me, and we are incredibly close. I grew up in a small village called Kfar Varim in the northern part of Israel, at the heart of the Galilee Mountains. I acquired my English at a family state mission in the United States. My childhood was loving and innocent, and my home is encouraging and supporting endless growth and development. Later, I was a fitness instructor in the Unit 669. It's a rescue unit of the Israeli Air Force. I trained 60 soldiers in their training period, which was widely versatile. My role was meaningful and satisfying, and I trained them in the field, on land, and even in the air. So I ended my service and flew to be an emissary of the Jewish Agency at Camp Ramah, Wisconsin. Fitness is woven into every step of my life up to this day, and I was a fitness and social instructor to the young campers. It was an unforgettable summer, and I got to bring my Israeli culture along with me to camp. So exploring led me to travel the world. I wanted to inhale new, fascinating, diverse cultures. I made 3 trips around the world to Central, South America, and Southeast Asia. I traveled alone, and I was genuinely independent, but when traveling with Israelis, you're never lonely. Ben-Gurion University, I did management and finance at my bachelor's. I was a social instructor to international students, which was an amazing experience. I watched as my students fell in love with my country, and I was proud to be part of it. I mainly focused around organizing social events and lectures in subjects such as the conflict from a neutral point of view, a story of a Mossad agent, and I think the most meaningful trip was a Gaza Strip envelope tour. My students get to see the conflict with their own eyes. So on the one hand, on the one side, they saw the beautiful kibbutz Nativ HaAsara, and on the other, Gaza itself. My approach was free of politics and conflict. I wanted my students to experience Israel as a beautiful Middle East country without background noises. And my students are in touch with me till this day, waiting patiently for their next visit. This role inspired me to apply for this amazing experience, the scholarship, and it allows me the opportunity to present my country and culture abroad through my own eyes. So today, I'm here thanks to you, creating connections and deep discussions with students from all over the world, sharing the incredible place I call home and them sharing theirs. People so far are amazing and very open to hear my story. I feel the importance of my world here, and I'm so grateful to you for choosing me to be the one who reaches for my classmates' hearts and minds regarding the unknown. And I will take back with me friendships I never thought I would have with people I never would have gotten the chance to meet. So thank you so much for this. And yes.
Many thanks, Tom. It's really nice to get to know one of our scholars in a little bit more detail. But it is now my great pleasure to introduce our speaker this evening. Baroness Ruth Deech has had a very distinguished and varied career as a lawyer, academic bioethicist, and politician, working across many spheres of public engagement. And amongst many roles, she was chair of the UK Human Fertilization and Embryology Authority from 1994 to 2001, governor of the BBC from 2002 to 2006, and principal of St Anne's College at the University of Oxford from 1991 to 2004. She was also the chair of the Bar Standards Board from 2009 to 2015, and a board member of the Law Commission from 2019 to 22. And there are many more roles that I can't really all name here, but I think we're getting a good impression of the breadth of activity that Baroness Deech has taken part in. Now, Baroness Deech received a damehood in 2003 and has been a crossbench life peer since 2005. And I'm delighted that Baroness Deech has joined us tonight to discuss freedom of speech on campus and the question of Israel. So please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Baroness Ruth Deech.
Thanks. I'm very pleased to be here. Let me start with a warning and a true story. When I go on holiday with my husband, I don't like to say who I am. I don't use the title Baroness. I don't want to talk politics, because if you say you're in Parliament, people will immediately lay into you about Liz Truss or the budget or something like that. I don't say who I am. But there was one holiday where I'd been chatting a lot to a lady, an elderly lady. And as we were leaving, we were disembarking, she rushed up to me and she said, "Now I know who you are," she said. "You're the one. Every time you open your mouth, you upset people." So that's me, and no doubt I shall do it again tonight. But I'm delighted to be free to speak here about freedom of speech. In summary, freedom of speech in general, and specifically on campus, is a topical and complex issue. There have been some high-profile cancellations of visiting speakers at universities, and also instances of hate and racist speech. The government's response is the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Bill, promoting and regulating the right of free speech. New laws may not be necessary, given that there is existing legislation safeguarding free speech on campus. And it doesn't sit well with the government's plan to control speech on the internet through the Online Safety Bill. An issue that arises frequently and causes much controversy is speech about Israel, some instances of which have been met with resistance or have lapsed into anti-Semitism. Legislation may be less effective in dealing with this than the encouragement of informal debate and the opportunity for students to meet each other, hence the value of the Zuckerberg and other international exchange scholarships, as we've just heard. Open your minds, and maybe I am the right person to speak, since when you have one Jew, you have two opinions. When you have two Jews, you have three opinions. So here goes. On the 12th of August, a man rushed into a literary festival being held in a backwater in New York State and stabbed Sir Salman Rushdie so badly that he nearly lost his life and will be handicapped for the rest of his life. The attacker was 24, born in the USA, but with Iranian sympathies. Iran denied any complicity, but did not condemn the attack. Indeed, shortly after, on BBC TV, an Arab journalist failed to condemn it, but explained that millions of Muslims around the world were outraged and felt that violence was justified against Rushdie because he'd written a novel, The Satanic Verses, which referenced the wives of the Prophet Muhammad in a dream sequence, and that there should be no reference to his wives. In mid-February 1989, following a violent riot against the book in Pakistan, the Ayatollah Khomeini, supreme leader of Iran, issued a fatwa calling for the death of Rushdie and his publishers, and called for Muslims to point him out to those who can kill them if they can't themselves. A fatwa is an executive order based on an interpretation of Islam. Rushdie was placed under police protection 24 hours a day here and moved from residence to residence for decades. Incidentally, one of the more interesting aspects of my university life was a dinner I hosted in St. Anne's College around 1998 to celebrate a new literary award, and it was attended by Sir Salman. He was then under constant police protection in this country. And to this day, I am mystified by how he was spirited into the college and spirited out with his then girlfriend, and without apparently any doors opening or closing. The significance of this piece of history and the recent assassination attempt on him cannot be overstated. I regret that the public seem to be losing interest in his fate. The issue was said to have divided Muslims from Westerners along the fault line of culture, and to have pitted a core Western value of freedom of expression, that no one should be killed or face a serious threat of being killed for what they say or write, against the view of some Muslims that non-Muslims should not be free to disparage the honor of the Prophet or indirectly criticize Islam through satire, if you remember Charlie Hebdo, and that religious violence is appropriate in order to defend Islam and Prophet Muhammad. Blasphemy law was abolished in England in 2008, in part on the ground that God and his prophets are capable of looking after themselves. I put it to you that our culture, especially in universities, is based on being able to say what one thinks within the law. How else do we debate and grow in our thinking, educate ourselves and our young people, view the events of the world, share our views through theatre and literature, and build bridges with others throughout the world? You must not succumb to groupthink or to the noisy threats and objections from a minority with an agenda. If you, students, are going to go out in the world and make a contribution, become professionals, even politicians, then you must speak up for the truth, learn to defend your position calmly, and meet the objections of those who disagree with you with reasoning. But freedom of speech is not absolute. Even in English law, which is pretty liberal, there are legal limits to what can be said. The classic example is the person who in a crowded theatre falsely cries, "Fire, fire," and causes people to stampede to the exit and be injured in the crush. Then there is the law of libel, which makes it an offence to publish anything which is untrue and defamatory about a person. Under Article 10 of the Human Rights Act 1998, everyone has the right to freedom of expression in the UK. The law goes on to say this: that freedom may be subject to formalities, conditions, restrictions, or penalties as are prescribed by law and are necessary in a democratic society. These may be in the interest of national security, territorial integrity, or public safety, for the prevention of disorder or crime, for the protection of health or morals, for the protection of the reputation or rights of others, for preventing the disclosure of information received in confidence, for maintaining the authority and impartiality of the judiciary. So we find quite a number of different UK laws lawfully outlawing hate speech. Among them is Section 4 of the Public Order Act 1986, which makes it an offence for a person to use threatening, abusive, or insulting words or behaviour that causes or is likely to cause another person harassment, alarm, or distress. This law has been revised over the years to include language that is deemed to incite racial or religious hatred, as well as hatred on the grounds of sexual orientation and language that encourages terrorism. The Terrorism Act 2006 criminalizes encouragement of terrorism, which includes making statements that glorify terrorist acts. Section 127 of the Communications Act 2003 makes it illegal to send a message via a public electronic communications network that is considered grossly offensive or of an indecent, obscene, or menacing character. None of this, of course, could ever justify violence in response. Criminalizing the incitement of violence or threats can be seen to be a justifiable limit on freedom of expression. I'm quoting the organization Liberty. What is controversial is the criminalization of language or behavior which may be unpleasant, may cause offense, but which is not inciting violence, criminality, and so on, says Liberty. It's so important an issue for society that freedom of speech is actually the First Amendment to the US Constitution. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. The 5 freedoms it protects are speech, religion, press, assembly, and the right to petition the government. Together, these 5 guaranteed freedoms make the people of the USA the freest in the world, so they would claim. Note that assembly should be peaceable. One has but to see the violence and dismay that occurs in American politics, criminal law, and even in their sport, to see that it is a burning issue even there, where freedom is the default position. It's sad that I've had to mention violence in connection with freedom of speech so frequently so far, because my own position, and I hope yours and every civilized person, is that legal speech, no matter how offensive it may seem, should never be countered by violence and murder. Debate, yes. Challenge in or out of court, but violence never. In relation to the internet, as I'm sure you yourselves will know, it's offered great opportunities to communicate, but sadly they include the spreading of hate and worse. In response to a Law Commission report, the government has published a new bill, not yet an act, introduced in the House of Commons in May. The Online Safety Bill is primarily meant to protect children from harmful sites, bearing in mind the tragic suicide of Molly Russell, recently. At age 14, she killed herself in 2017 after seeing images of self-harm and suicide on Instagram. In the last 6 months of her life, Molly used her Instagram account more than 120 times a day. But the bill goes further than this and would mandate regulation of internet content that is legal but harmful to adults. There's no definition of this, but it would be set out in government guidelines and is likely to be about physical and psychological harm that can be caused to adults from reading or watching internet material. This is, of course, full of problems that affect our right to freedom of speech. Officials have been working to change the definition of what is deemed legal but harmful under the proposed legislation in order to give greater scope to say online what would be acceptable in person, even if someone deems it offensive. This highlights exactly the problem with freedom of speech and when it conflicts with being offensive. As far as students go, some research shows that time spent on social media can increase communication and social skills and broaden horizons. Other research shows that higher internet users have higher rates of anxiety, cyberstalking, depression, sleep deprivation, bullying, and isolation. If there's time, I'd like to hear which of those two sides affect you here. There are other English laws which are also too restrictive, in my view, of freedom of speech. For example, the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act this year, which cracks down on annoying protests. The Public Order Act has been subject to too many extensions to police hate speech. Section 40 of the Crime and Courts Act 2013 would force publishers to sign up to a state-backed regulator, but luckily that section is not in force. The relevance in the university is this. Debates around freedom of expression in recent years have centered on issues such as the role of cancel culture, no platforming, and free speech at universities. Cancel culture refers to a social climate in which a person or organization is likely to be ostracized in response to a perceived wrongdoing, while no platforming refers to the practice of denying someone the opportunity to speak in a political debate or forum. I want to emphasize that universities are no place to feel comfortable, whether in relation to the curriculum contents or lecturers' views. Feeling uncomfortable and having to analyze why, and maybe to defend your position, is a much more worthwhile pursuit. Reportedly, too many students want to stop controversial speech in order that everyone should feel comfortable. I seem to be going the wrong way, isn't it? I'm sure you are all aware that there have been many disputes in universities about whether someone is free to speak or not. Not just lecturers and students, but visiting speakers. The controversial topics range from minority issues to transgender, the Middle East to abortion. It used to be the right wing demanding that speech be constrained to suit their idea of decency. For example, no pornography. Now it's the left wing wanting to stop their definition of hate speech and to protect students from anything that upsets them or makes them feel unsafe or uncomfortable. Professor Kathleen Stock, pictured here, felt obliged to resign from Sussex University because her views on transgender issues were held to be unacceptable after a campaign against her which necessitated bodyguards and CCTV. Her views were perfectly legal, but in the view of some, should not have been voiced. Very recently in Cambridge, students confessed that they were frightened to listen to a talk by Helen Joyce, a scientist who's written about gender, and the college head refused to attend. Normally, one would not expect a master to attend every speech in the college, but this one went out of her way to announce that she was, in effect, boycotting a speech before she'd heard it, and she, a lawyer. The college was rightly condemned, and students were assisted to attend the speech by a proponent of free speech. Yet debate on things that matter is the essential point of a university education, which takes us back to Rushdie and freedom in and outside universities to write and say things that some people violently dislike. A 2020 poll found that 27% of students at British universities had hidden their opinions when they were at odds with those of their peers and tutors, with more than half of those self-censoring because of their non-conformist political views. A further 40% withheld their opinions on ethical or religious subjects for fear of being judged negatively by their peers. 2/5 of the respondents said no platforming had become more frequent at their universities. Or just you try announcing that you voted leave at dinner parties in Islington or Hampstead or North Oxford. An example of some of the cancellations. A first-year student at the University of Kent was placed under investigation for questioning whether George Floyd deserved martyrdom status, given his criminal record. The Falmouth and Exeter Students' Union expelled a student for responding to an email from the union inviting him to a series of events celebrating Black History Month by saying he'd rather jump down a mine shaft. Durham disaffiliated the Durham Students' Conservative Association and Free Market Association. A group of LGBT activists tried to get a Labour councillor who worked as a porter at Clare College, Cambridge, fired for refusing to vote for a Cambridge Council motion stating trans women are women. Worcester College, Oxford rescinded a Christian Concern summer school. Professor Jo Phoenix was forced to resign over her gender-critical views at the Open University. 16 academics were threatened with violence at Cardiff University for asking the university to disaffiliate from Stonewall, and every day many more transgender critics are being disciplined. The government's response to what has been seen to be a crisis of free speech has been the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Bill. The bill's stated purpose is to protect lawful freedom of speech and academic freedom on campus. It will strengthen existing legislation and address gaps in existing law, but it introduces a touch of prospective censorship, I would add, more than just a means to address a problem once the breach of duties has taken place. New duties will be placed on universities to take reasonably practical steps to secure freedom of speech within the law, and we know that's restrictive for staff, members, students, and visiting speakers. They'll be duty-bound to pay particular attention to the importance of free speech when taking these steps. Importantly, these duties also, for the first time, extend to academic freedom, which is not the same as freedom of speech. Academic freedom relates to academics' rights to teach and research freely. Furthermore, universities must publish a code of practice, including a statement of the values and procedures they'll uphold, and which they must bring to the attention of their students at least once a year. Student unions are at the heart of many students' university experience. They too will have to take steps to secure lawful freedom of speech and publish their own code of practice. At present, there are no effective means of enforcing the law if universities are in breach of it. So this may explain some individuals' hesitancy to express their views. But the bill creates a new statutory tort, that's a legal action, for breach of freedom of speech duties by universities and student unions. This will enable individuals to seek legal redress for loss they've suffered as a result of breach of their right of freedom of speech. The bill gives new powers to the Office for Students, which will provide guidance and help to secure free speech, and it will be required to impose mandatory registration conditions on universities relating to freedom of speech and academic freedom, and monitoring the compliance of student unions with their freedom of speech duties. At the moment, there is no specific route for those who might be affected by not getting their freedom of speech to lodge complaints. The bill creates a requirement for the Office for Students to provide a complaint scheme that will give a right of redress for students, members, staff, and visiting speakers. This scheme will be overseen by the new post of Director for Freedom of Speech and Academic Freedom. There are fears this might be a political appointment. I have a personal interest in this as the first holder of the Office of the Independent Adjudicator for Higher Education, dealing with student complaints, and secondly, as former principal of St Anne's, Oxford, where the only time I ever banned speech was a session that was planned for visitors from London on how to practice safe male sadomasochism, which involved driving nails into parts of the body I'd rather not name. I have no regrets about having banned that. My views in a nutshell are that there is a problem, but this bill isn't the right way to tackle it. The new bill is not only superfluous and riddled with contradictions and ambiguities, but it's likely to make the situation worse if activists use the complaint system and even take to the courts. A student life is only 3 years, and taking to the courts in any subject, as we know, is likely to last long beyond their graduation and do them no good. The complaint system will be in addition to the long-established and, I would say, successful one run by the Office of the Independent Adjudicator for Higher Education, which I set up. Moreover, I can't see the point of duplicating what's already available at the Adjudication Office. The net result is likely to be that students will be even more cautious about arranging controversial speakers for fear of legal outcomes. They may stick to inviting accredited left-wing speakers for the sake of a quiet life. Sadly, I've had significant experience of trying to help Jewish students as a patron of UK Lawyers for Israel. A record 111 incidents of anti-Semitic abuse at universities was reported in 2021. Those students have faced threats to their safety and even refusals of references when trying to assert their rights to freedom of expression. The London colleges, notably LSE, SOAS, KCL and UCL, are often regarded as hostile environments for Jewish students. And right now, Goldsmiths College has embarked on a study of anti-Semitism in itself. This new law must not undermine the existing protections, flimsy though they are, to stop anti-Jewish racism and Holocaust denial. It is a difficult balance to achieve. Don't universities also have duties to prevent harassment and foster good relations under their public sector equality duty? Are they doing it? Will freedom of speech trump the other values that universities promote? There's no requirement in the bill to promote competing freedoms and consider them. How does an authority decide between, on the one hand, Holocaust denial as an exercise of freedom of speech, it's not illegal, and on the other, the right of Jewish students not to be harassed and defamed? Will there still be a duty to prevent serious psychological injury? What about the freedom to speak against transgender issues? Will academic freedom triumph over demonstrably false assertions? What about a lecturer who wants to say that the US election was stolen from Trump or that climate change is a lie? The emphasis in the bill on freedom may in future provide a cover for knowingly malicious and mendacious conduct. Conspiracy theories put forward together with intimidation and vilification may be permissible and tolerable as political speech, but not as academic freedom, which they are not, or free speech, which has to be based on truth, not pseudoscience or neglect of the truth. We've seen the dangers of that in the political sphere. And this brings me to the nub of tonight's lecture, the Zuckerberg Scholarship. It brings an Israeli graduate student to Brookes for a one-year degree. It's been an astonishing success, as we've just heard from Tom. Take this appreciative comment from a Bedouin woman. She said, "The scholarship changed me, allowed me to see another community, which allows everybody to talk freely and allows a woman to talk freely about her ideas and opinions. When I returned home, I convinced other Bedouin girls to fight for their right too to study at university." Other scholars commented on the excellence of this university and the opportunity to meet and communicate from others all around the world. I note that there are students from about 150 nations studying here. And what better way can there be of fostering international understanding and tolerance? Part of the aims of the scholarship is to foster good understanding between Israel and other nations, and of course, to get Israelis to understand Brits. Why is this so important? And especially important to the Oxford Jewish community who supported the scholarship from the outset. It is because there is a striking flashpoint in freedom of speech on campus, and that is discussion about the Israel-Palestine situation. Quite often, a lecture by an Israeli speaker, no matter how dovish, ends in disruption and silencing. In recent years, speakers have been forced off in KCL, Ami Ayalon, UCL, Henmazik. The Israel ambassador had to be rushed out of LSE after threats, and the organizers were harassed. Jewish students have reported being marked down or refused a reference because of their supposedly Zionist views. A student society at KCL had to pay for its own security surrounding an Israeli lecture. The Oxford Union Labour Society was investigated for alleged bullying and anti-Semitism. Jewish students were banned from a student meeting at Goldsmiths about Palestine. The many student unions that have supported boycott, disinvestment, and sanctions against Israel are, in effect, preventing Jewish students from participating in union events or getting Israeli or even kosher food products and mixing with academics and students in their own disciplines in Israel. Then there are countless incidents on campus of swastika daubing, anti-Semitic graffiti, and messages on Facebook. I should say that the latter are not protected by free speech, but are racist and therefore illegal under statute. There is so much polarization and inability to see the other side's point of view, so much holding people to account for what they are rather than what they believe or say. There is, by the way, no such activity in relation to the actions of, for example, Russia, China, or Saudi Arabia against their students on campus, despite the recorded dreadful breaches of human rights, repression of women and ethnic minorities, executions, and bloodshed in their countries. I recently listened to a lecture by an Iranian woman describing the terrible treatment and oppression of women in Iran, a system she described as apartheid. It's a strong word, but probably rightly used, where within one state, half the population is kept apart from the other half and not allowed to mingle. I need hardly say that that is not the case of Arabs living in Israel, and that the word apartheid, which is sometimes used to slur the state, is inaccurate and done in order to whip up hate, the new form of anti-Semitism being the vilification of the few square miles that represent the only Jewish state and safe haven for Jews in the world. Hostility to Israel on campus has become fashionable and a political identity. Rather than fetishizing a conflict on which few are experts, students should visit Israel and Palestine for themselves and build dialogue. And remember, we may all be wrong in our fixed views. The late Jacob Bronowski, the great philosopher, said that genocide and other tragedies result from when people think they have absolute knowledge, aspire to the knowledge of gods, and brook no opposite opinion based on reality or science. Mark Twain said, "Whenever you find you're on the side of the majority, it's time to pause and reflect." When Jewish students protest against these activities, they're often met with the answer that it's freedom of speech. As I've explained, sometimes it isn't. It's stirring up hatred in many cases. And anyways, universities have a special duty under the Equality Act to promote harmonious relations between different groups on campus. And they should be being far more proactive. There are two ways to defuse this and allow students to learn, if they want to, about the conflicts in the Middle East. One is for even more universities and institutions to adopt the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism as a benchmark. The IHRA is an organization of 35 countries, plus some observers, dedicated to education, research, and remembrance about the Holocaust, and to fighting against genocide, xenophobia, ethnic cleansing, racism, and anti-Semitism. It is not a legally enforceable definition, but it's been adopted by over 100 universities and enables administrators to judge what's happened when there is a problem. I'm sorry to see that it has not been adopted by Brooks. The relevant part reads like this: anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews, which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. It then gives examples to help understanding. Manifestations might include the targeting of the State of Israel, conceived as a Jewish collectivity. But this is important. Criticism of Israel, similar to that leveled against any other country, is not anti-Semitic. Calling for the killing or harming of Jews in the name of a radical ideology or an extremist view of religion. Making mendacious, dehumanizing, demonizing, or stereotypical allegations about Jews as such, or the power of Jews as collective, especially but not exclusively the myth about a world Jewish conspiracy or Jews controlling the media, economy, government, or other societal institutions. Accusing Jews as a people of being responsible for real or imagined wrongdoing committed by a single Jewish person or group, or even for acts committed by non-Jews. Holocaust denial, accusing the Jews as a people or Israel as a state of inventing or exaggerating the Holocaust, accusing Jews of being more loyal to Israel or the alleged priorities of Jews worldwide than to the interests of their own nations, denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination, for example, by claiming that the existence of a state of Israel is a racist endeavor, applying double standards by requiring of it a behavior not expected or demanded of any other democratic nation, using the symbols and images associated with classic anti-Semitism, for example, claims of Jews killing Jesus or blood libel to characterize Israel or Israelis, drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis, holding Jews collectively responsible for actions of the State of Israel. Note, important, that ordinary criticism of Israel, in the same way that one might criticize the government of the USA or of Russia, is acceptable. And in no way has the application of this definition silenced anyone. Just Google Palestine meetings on campus, page after page, and compare that with meetings on China or Russia or Iran. More insidiously, many UK universities, including this one, are hosting Confucius Institutes, which are overseen by the Chinese Ministry of Education and are allegedly designed to promote propaganda in relation to that country's abuse of its minorities. There have been severe allegations and concerns expressed about Confucius institutes in Parliament and the media recently. The Higher Education Freedom of Speech Bill provides that the Office for Students should oversee foreign funding like that to ensure that no barriers are placed on freedom of speech. Despite all this, and despite the fact that I'm a lawyer, I conclude by saying that what Brooks is doing in practice is far more relevant to friendship and freedom of speech than any amount of law. It's by sitting down and talking to one another, hosting wonderful students like Tom, listening to lectures peacefully and not seeing everything in black and white terms, by which I mean that freedom flourishes best when each side does not believe that they, and they alone, have a monopoly of wisdom, and that any opposition must be evil. There should be no such polarization. Congratulations to you. I note how Brooks has risen dramatically up the league tables of universities, and its student satisfaction rate is high. And so it will remain, as long as you can talk to each other, to students from all over the world with different points of view, peaceably and rationally. Thank you very much.